with the highly anticipated release of version 1.5, the banner schedule has returned to normal, with us only having Ashra Yao's banner for the next 3 weeks and Evelyn's banner following afterwards, which I definitely expect many players are looking forward to, since not only does she have an amazing design but is also expected to be the best attacker in the game on release. So especially since the 1.5 main story act has provided early access to Evelyn and her full kit, I'm gonna go ahead and break down Evelyn's kit, go over some of her best team synergies, viable W engines she would be able to utilize, discraft sets you can pre-farm before her release, then I'll be wrapping it up with Evelyn's overall value and whether or not you should summon. Just before we jump into it, as always, would really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more ZenlessZoneZero content and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Now kicking it off with Evelyn's kit breakdown, as we already know, Evelyn is a fire type attacker and of course is expected to be a powerful DPS. Similar to a few other characters, Evelyn does utilize a gauge mechanic that accumulates burning embers whenever she deals damage to enemies, and once the gauge has reached 50%, Evelyn will be able to activate the first form Garrote attack, which allows Evelyn to lunge forward at enemies with considerable range and gains 1 tether point. Although if you have completely maxed out the gauge, then holding down the basic attack will activate the second form Garrote attack, which deals slightly more damage, with Evelyn dealing a follow-up attack after the first form lunge and will gain 2 tether points. Now alongside Evelyn's gauge, it does indicate the amount of tether points obtained, with Evelyn being able to hold a max of 3 tether points. Upon reaching 3 points, they will be consumed with the very next Garrote attack, which will switch into a lower interrupt level version of Chain Attack Lunar Lux Snare, and as you can imagine, the attack will deal massive damage and will also have a lot more range to hit multiple enemies. In specific, the attack has a damage multiplier at level 9 of 1432.5%, and for reference, the ultimate has a damage multiplier of 3434.9%. So the Lunar Lux Snare attack holds great value, as it will certainly be one of Evelyn's most powerful abilities. Now with Evelyn's skill, it is quite unique and versatile, unlike any other DPS, considering that it does have 2 stages and the first stage doesn't consume any energy, since it deals little to no damage, and the main purpose would be for Evelyn to enter a binding seal with an enemy, which can be visually seen with the red strings attached between the enemy and Evelyn. Upon activating the skill once more, you can either activate the first form skill or the second form skill. Both forms either way will allow Evelyn to teleport to the enemy and will detonate a burst of fire damage along with crowd controlling smaller enemies together. Although the first form skill doesn't consume any energy and deals a low amount of damage, whereas the second form skill will consume energy and deals a significant amount of damage. So you would ideally aim to activate the second form skill in order to deal massive damage, but the first form skill can be used to finish off smaller enemies and to even traverse a bit quicker if you are in a binding seal. Now the special aspect about Evelyn's binding seal is that it can be inflicted through various ways aside from the skill, such as through dodge counters, quick assists, assist follow-ups, chain attacks, and even the ultimate. So Evelyn would be able to cast the second stage skill immediately after many abilities to deal a quick burst of damage. Additionally, if an enemy is within a binding state and you do switch to another character, Evelyn follows up with the first form skill and deals damage whilst technically off field. So as mentioned, there is quite a lot of versatility with the skill, and in specific the binding seal, since Evelyn can constantly teleport regardless of energy and could be off field to deal a burst of fire damage. Now with the ultimate, Evelyn is in fact the only character to have 2 different ultimate variations, but the only difference is that the first ultimate cast will allow Evelyn to enter the Dance of the Awakened Fire state, which lasts for the rest of the battle and can be noticed by Evelyn removing her jacket within the animation. Also through the fact that your concentration on the actual fight might start to diminish for some odd reason. Whilst in the Awakened Fire state, the Lunar Lux Snare chain attack that consumes 3 tether points will instead only consume 2, so you do pretty much want to pop the ultimate as soon as possible, given Evelyn's DPS will increase from being able to activate the Lunar Lux Snare chain attack much more frequently. Now moving on to Evelyn's core skills and kicking it off with the first one, upon entering a Binding Seal, Evelyn's crit rate is increased by 23% at skill level 6 and lasts for 10 seconds after exiting the Binding Seal. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, Evelyn will be able to follow up with an attack if in a Binding Seal and switched off field. So at max level, I do assume the crit rate buff will be raised to 25%, and considering how often Evelyn will be in a Binding Seal, you could pretty much consider the crit rate buff to have 100% uptime. With that, it will allow for building Evelyn to be a lot easier and to perhaps focus more on crit damage rolled over crit rate in order to maximize Evelyn's damage. Now as for the second core skill, it will as expected link with Evelyn's team synergies, and for an attacker, the requirements to activate the second core skill are extremely flexible, since when Evelyn is with either a stun or support character, her chain attack and ultimate damage is increased by 30%. In addition, when Evelyn's crit rate hits 80%, the damage multiplier for the chain attack and ultimate are increased to 125% of the original value. In other words, Evelyn will deal significantly more damage through both her chain attack and ultimate when paired with allies she would ideally want as an attacker. So immediately with Evelyn's best team, it would consist of herself alongside Lighter and either Caesar or Astra Yao, with Lighter being a stun character that specializes in supporting ice and fire type attackers. It's pretty obvious that he will synergize extremely well with Evelyn and will be her best partner, considering he is capable of reducing fire resistance on enemies, increases fire damage of allies, and extends the stun window by 3 seconds more than usual. So with that in mind, Evelyn will deal a ton more damage alongside Lighter. As for who to use between Caesar and Astra Yao, it is purely down to which out of the two you have or prefer, since both are insanely powerful supports and will synergize very well with Evelyn. However, Astra Yao might just possibly edge out Caesar, since along with providing allies with additional crit damage through her skill, she will also allow for allies to cast 2 chain attacks immediately after popping her ultimate, which Evelyn will definitely take advantage of since the second core skill does buff her chain attack damage massively. Therefore, the most optimal team would be Evelyn alongside Lighter and Astra Yao. But considering both Evelyn and Astra Yao are releasing back to back, there is a low chance that you'll be able to pull both, and so Caesar would then be the next best support, which is arguably just as valuable or even more depending on your own preference. Now as for a few slight different team variations, you could use Evelyn alongside Lighter and Bernice to form a mono fire team, which would be great for Evelyn when especially utilizing the Inferno Metal set, along with enabling for more of a dual DPS composition with Bernice specializing in dealing damage off field. Alternatively, Lucy could be utilized instead as more of a free-to-play support, which can also deal damage off-field and provide a considerable attack buff to allies of 600 flat attack. Now instead of Lighter, you could perhaps use Changli, since she is an amazing universal stun character, which would be capable of increasing the stun damage multiplier by 80%, allowing Evelyn to deal significantly more burst damage whilst the enemy is stunned. Alongside Evelyn and Changli, you could use Rina, since she does buff all allies pen ratio and takes up little to no field time. Although, you could pretty much use any of the aforementioned supports instead of Rina, as they would still synergize very well. Now those are going to be the more notable team synergies for Evelyn, but since her core skill requirement is extremely easy to activate, it allows Evelyn to certainly be one of the most flexible DPS characters in the game. So many other characters such as Camellya, Anby and Nicole would be able to synergize with Evelyn even though they might not provide the most value. So just in terms of versatility, Evelyn is going to be very easy to build around, with there being many premium and free-to-play synergies. Now regarding Evelyn's viable W engines, given she is an attacker and would want as much crit rate in order to reach the 80% threshold within her second core skill, the signature W engine would of course be her best in slot, since it will certainly have a crit rate main stat, along with being able to buff Evelyn's fire damage and potentially an additional buff in crit rate or crit damage. Though as for a few alternative options, an S-rank W engine such as Steel Cushion or Deep Sea Visitor would definitely be viable, given they both provide a high amount of crit rate of 24% alongside a lot of attack through the main stats. However, Evelyn wouldn't exactly be able to utilize the entire passive from these W engines, as they do specialize in buffing different elements than fire. But with the Deep Sea Visitor in specific, Evelyn would be able to activate part of the passive through simply dealing basic attacks, leading to it providing an additional 10% crit rate on top of the 24% crit rate main stat. So as for the best S rank alternative, the Deep Sea Visitor would be the best option due to the insane amount of crit rate it can provide. As for a few A rank alternatives, the Makato Desire or Cannon Rotor would be solid W engines to utilize despite being A ranks, considering both provide only 4% less crit rate through the main stat than S rank alternatives, along with Evelyn being capable of fully activating their passives. Though between them, the Makato Desire would definitely be the better option, since not only was it free through the event in 1.4, but can also provide an even higher attack bonus of up to 19.2% through the passive. Whereas the Cannon Rotor is a battle pass weapon, along with the passive having lengthy cooldowns unless you do invest in picking up a few more copies of it. Lastly, as it is a great universal W engine, if you are able to achieve 80% crit rate without the W engine, then the Brimstone would be a great S rank alternative, since it does provide a huge 30% attack main stat and an additional attack increase through the passive. However, it will be quite difficult for Evelyn to utilize it, given a crit rate W engine is possibly a must to allow Evelyn to reach 80% crit rate. So overall, it goes without saying that the signature W engine will be the best for Evelyn, and if you want the very best build, then it would be a must pull. Although there are quite a few solid alternatives, with the Deep Sea Visitor being the best S rank option and the Makato Desire being the best A rank option. Now moving on to Evelyn's disk drive builds, the most optimal build will most likely be a 4-piece Inferno Metal set alongside a 2-piece Woodpecker Electro set, given the Inferno Metal set will increase fire damage by 10%, along with increasing Evelyn's crit rate by a massive 28% for 8 seconds upon hitting a burning enemy. Then with the Woodpecker Electro 2-piece effect, it would provide Evelyn with an additional 8% crit rate to ensure you do reach the high 80% crit rate requirement. So this disk drive build in particular would be perfect for Evelyn, since it will pretty much ensure she does activate the second core skill and would reduce the burden on substats. Although if you don't require an additional 8% crit rate from the Woodpecker Electro set, you could use a few other disk drive sets as an alternative, such as the Hormone Punk or Astral Voice for an additional 10% attack bonus, or the Branch and Blade Song for an additional 16% crit damage bonus, or even the Puffer Electro set for an additional 8% pen ratio bonus. However, it is likely best to go with the one that has the best substats between the Branch and Blade Song, or either the Hormone Punk and Astral Voice. On that note, the best disk drive main stats to prioritize would be crit rate on the 4th disk drive, fire damage bonus on the 5th disk drive, but attack percent would also be viable, and on the final disk drive, it would be best to aim for attack percent. As for substats, crit rate and crit damage will of course be top priority, then attack percent, pen and flat attack. With that, Evelyn's optimal disk drive build is pretty straightforward, but for those that especially invested in Soldier 11's disk drives, you more or less would be able to switch them over to Evelyn and wouldn't need to farm as much in preparation. So overall, Evelyn is without a doubt going to be an amazing attacker, and not only looks aesthetically amazing, but feels incredible to play with since her combat is fast-paced, flashy, and deals great damage from just the early access. So it would be fair to assume she would be capable of dealing a ton of damage with her optimal build on release. In addition, she is likely going to be the best attacker, and so if you are a fan of attack characters in particular and have been holding out on picking up anomaly characters, then Evelyn is going to be a great character to pick up. However, as of me recording this, the first character for 1.6 has been revealed to be an S-rank version of Anby, and surprisingly is an electric type attacker. So as much as Evelyn will be the best attacker on release, there is definitely potential for Anby to sweep the title as best attacker from Evelyn soon after. which might be a good reason to skip Evelyn if you want the very best attacker. But I'll go into more detail about Anby and 1.6 in another video. Lastly, given Astra Yao is currently out and is our first limited support, I would strongly advise for every player to prioritize Astra over Evelyn, as she will hold a ton more value. Although if you do manage to pick up Astra and have enough polychromes to go in for Evelyn, alongside the fact that you do need a new DPS or perhaps just like Evelyn's design or playstyle, then you should for certain summon for Evelyn. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe for more ZenlessZoneZero content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also, drop a comment down below on whether you are going to be pulling for Evelyn, and if so, which team are you going to be running her on? And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.